And here we are to talk about listening and talking. This is Dr. Nancy Zier, the sales whisperer, and
Hirsch Repun, the message therapist. And we've been tending to follow up on from week to week on this process of sales and messaging. And certainly listening is it's come to my attention that over the last few years I realized listening is perhaps more important than speaking, and it certainly is a precursor to speaking in my opinion. What do you think, Nancy?
well, definitely when it comes to selling, Hirsch, there's no question that listening is more important than talking. And I know many examples of people who have lost the sale because they talk too much. Of course, they may have been talking the wrong language based upon their prospect's personality style, but in general, talking too much is a poor plan. We need to listen better and hear what our prospect is saying, because actually, Hirsch, the prospect will tell us how to sell to them. So very important that we zip the lip and listen.
Well, from my experience, um, it was a realization that I listened a lot more. And when I started podcasting, I realized people would say, "Oh, you're an amazing listener," and I had never really thought about it, but it caused me to reflect on how I had worked with clients all these years, and I realized, oh yeah, a lot of time is spent listening to them speak. But until you and I connected, I wasn't tuned in to how the personalities interact with one another. And this is obviously because of your expertise. This is an ongoing part of our know and sell pointers. Is if you've ever heard the expression, "Do you know who you're talking to?" That's a really good segue into what you do, because your expertise is in knowing exactly who you're talking to and knowing how they want to be addressed, right?
Right, right. Well, it's interesting you mentioned about the listening piece for yourself, because you are the message therapist. And one of the things that I admire and like so much about what you do, Hirsch, is, of course, your listening skill, pulling out from your prospects information, ideas, perspectives, values that generally speaking they don't lead with, and yet are crucial to helping understand their brand and therefore framing the message that will help them be set apart from their competitors.
Now, what about people who are, let's talk about compatibility, and what we should be listening for in our prospective clients and collaborators.
Good question. What should we be listening for? It's a combination of the vocal qualities and a change in the vocal qualities. So the three vocal qualities that are most key are loudness or volume, speed, rate of speaking, and the last one is inflection. Inflection, not many people know about it, but it's when the voice goes up or down or draws out syllables. Those three vocal qualities will help identify to whom you're speaking. And when there's a shift, for example, they were speaking fairly rapidly and they slowed down, that's a sure sign that something is up and that you need to pay even closer attention to that shift. The same would be true, Hirsch, if they were speaking very, slowly and then speeded up. These are telltale signs that you need to check what's going on.
And what could be going on? Let's say somebody's having a normal conversation and then they rapidly just start rapidly accelerating their speech pattern. What does that tell you?
It's excitement, or it could be nervousness. And so, depending upon what you're hearing as content, and perhaps if you visually you're able to see them, you would know whether it's excitement and they're speeded up because they're so excited, or they feel threatened, they're feeling nervous. And so the speed up is because they're feeling out of control.
Ah, okay. And the slowing down aspect?
This is really interesting because this indicates probably that the person is going into a different mode of decision making. And I'll share a quick little story. It happened to my colleague, Mary Peckus. She's the one who turned me on to the vocal qualities and how important they are in identifying personality style. She had a career in telemarketing for 35 years. And so listening was her only mode of getting information because she was on the phone all the time. And she would ask for people permission to record the conversations, excuse me. And this particular fellow happened to be named Tom. Tom started off all lively and chatty and bubbly. And then they asked a question in which Tom had to make a decision. Voice changed, just like what I demonstrated. He got slower, more thoughtful. And this then cued Mary to why she was having trouble identifying people's buying styles, because she was only paying attention to their initial conversation when they were being social rather than their decision-making conversation. Interesting, right?
Yeah, very interesting. And one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of listening and talking is it's not always about a conversation. In other words, let's say you have a conversation, then you're having some kind of follow-up correspondence. Let's say it's over email. The prospect that you're talking to asks you for some information. You send the information. They acknowledge receipt of the information. They say, "Oh, that's great, thank you. I'm going to be away for a few days." Now, the ball is in either their court or our court to continue this conversation. But what is their silence perhaps tell you?
So, of course, there are, I differentiate between people who make decisions quickly and people who take more time. And so somebody who's a quick decision maker, but then tells you they're going to be away, the important part is, do you have another date to connect? Because if you don't, you're in this never land of wondering what's going on, which is, I think your question is asking, like, okay, how do I interpret their being away for a few days? Is, obviously if it's a weekend or something, it makes perfect sense. But in the middle of the week, it's like, are they just simply not able? Are they that number 4 type of personality style that avoids confrontation and doesn't like, talking about things that are unpleasant, so to speak. So yeah, the same behavior can be interpreted in different ways. And so it depends upon how well you know your client before.
Yeah. And in some cases, if it's a prospect, let's say, then you don't really know them that well yet. And there's a question of we've talked about not wanting to be too salesy or pushy. Mm-hmm. And when a prospect might need a little nudge or might need a little,
yes,
the idea of, well, I was the last one to reach out to them. I didn't hear back. Do I reach out again? Do I offer them more information? What is it? What are they saying in the quiet space?
See, the rule of thumb, Hirsch, is that you should never allow a conversation to end without the next step identified. Mm-hmm. And even if they're saying, well, I'll be away for a few days, that would stimulate me to say, great, are you coming back next Tuesday, Wednesday? Let's put something on the book for the end of the week or the following week, whatever. It's so important to have that next date and that next appointment set, even if it's a quick phone call. That happened to be earlier this morning, where we weren't going to have a face-to-face Zoom meeting but we needed a check-in, and so from the check-in, we then scheduled time for an actual meeting next week.
Mhm.
It's so important, and again, both of us don't want to be salesy. And one of the ways to avoid being salesy is to ask for permission. So, would it be okay with you? May I? Could you do this? Asking permission is the way it's done. And then you never have to worry that the follow-up is unwanted.
Right. Right. And in some cases you say, in some cases we're never going to get that follow-up booked on the initial call. Um, it's definitely something we want to do. But go ahead. Yeah,
I'm going to disagree with that, because even if they hedge, and I've had this happen many times, well, I'll call you. I will then take the initiative and say, well, if I don't hear from you, say in 3 weeks, would it be okay if I reached out?
right. Yes.
Okay, so in other words, it's that uncertainty of our relationship, not knowing what the next step is going to be, that drives us nuts and then makes us doubt ourselves. And that's where the salesy, pushy part comes into play, because then I don't want to be pushy, but I also don't know what's going on.
Right. And of course, this is the stuff that we're dealing with all the time with our, you know, that whole tower of, if the messaging is right,
Mhm.
then that's taken care of.
Mhm.
If the conversation takes place and you've asked for permission to follow up, you followed that good, best practice.
Exactly.
And if you haven't heard from them and you have followed up, then you've done that. You've done that right, because you did ask if you could follow up, and probably in that follow up you asked permission or made a suggestion, and at some point, there's you've done everything you can do.
And again, we have covered this in a previous session, but when it gets to the point where someone says no, that's okay. The
Yeah.
timing isn't always right. Again, we accept graciously people's responses, because we welcome having a decision. We welcome having clarity around what's going on. But, things have a way of changing. So, Hirsch, say in the next 3 months, would it be okay if I knocked on your door again? It's
Right.
that simple. And again, chances are you're going to say yes, right? Am I correct? 3 months,
Yeah.
you're willing to say, oh, she'll
Sure.
forget me
Yeah.
by then.
Right. Right.
Okay. However, if you've got a good follow-up or CRM system, whatever it is, you don't forget them, and you do make a note that in 3 months you reach out again in some fashion. And even again, the timing may not be right 3 months hence, but the fact that I'm staying in touch and I'm keeping my word is going to impress you. And it's also keeping me top of mind, because the pain point, the issue, the solution I offer, again, it may not be the right timing. However, if I continue to be professional and show up, it could change.
And that's a very good point. A good point to maybe end this episode on, is that when people say, "Hey, 3 months ago you suggested that I get back in touch. I'm just getting back in touch," we don't even realize it, but it is building that relationship. We
That
feel much
is
more
our point.
trust. We feel
Yes.
much more trust. We trust them professionally
Yes.
because they asked, could they follow up, and now they're following up.
Exactly. And so this is the value of the likability sales system, because it's based upon the premise of asking for permission and not making assumptions. So, yeah, we do have to close now, but any last thoughts before we bid them adieu?
Well, just that the relationship building sometimes takes place between the lines, between the question, the offer, the permission. the consistency and the silence are all part of relationship building.
Yes, and it is hopefully part of one's brand, right? To be authentic, to show up professionally.
Yep,
right?
indeed.
To your sales success. We'll see you next Tuesday at noon. This is Dr. Nancy Zaire, Sales Whisperer.
And Hirsch Repun, the